see somebody at the office, I know he's coming. And if I don't see him at the office, he's probably not coming, right? There was a line of sight to know that the employee was who he was. But now with this whole thing of digital and everybody going on to a digital transformation and people getting mobile, the biggest issue for everybody right now is identity, right? Because the identity is the one is the biggest I would say the cause for breaches to happen. And so the question is, have you implemented, and I'm just kind of reflecting the statistics back to you in a sense, have you implemented a very strong single sign on? Because a lot of you all have a lot of business applications, and some of you all have not yet set up this SSO, which leads to a user starting to save his passwords in contacts under pass or p. You have all of that stuff. So maybe it's time to look at having the single sign-on piece. And you want to have stronger authentication when certain accesses are happening. So have you set up a multi-factor authentication, or do you want to allow, you want to be able, your system or a policy to allow people to come in based on a set of conditions, whether he's coming in with a jailbroken device, whether he's in a certain location, or whether his credentials are actually leaked on the dark web, which you don't know, right? So I mean, I'm of course, this is a whole Microsoft webinar, but Microsoft has those services available which can tell you that your MDs or CEO or CFOs, typically these are the profile of people who are normally pinged and attacked. I mean, his credentials have been found on the dark web. So maybe when there is a login, you need to basically, maybe challenge him again, because that's a very risky, credential that's out there. So identity, the whole point of this is that have you set up a very, very strong identity, especially during this time when nobody is coming to office even, right? And of course, the third thing is in terms of breach, and that's very relative. I mean, we can talk big numbers and $500 billion, but the point is for your own organizations, if somebody is going to get the information or the IP that you have, what is it worth to you? All right. And what are the controls you put on? So I think these are kind of the top three things that are going on in everybody's mind. And if you step back a little bit, and I'm hoping my slide has changed, Kiran, digital expands, right?
All right, sir.
Yeah, so if you look at it earlier on, all your data was very much within your data center, four walls of the room or four walls of a data center, and I was good to go, right? But slowly over time, with this whole digital, transformation happening, your users have begun to get mobile, right? And suddenly, what's happening is that they are out of sight. And moment they go out of sight, they still want to access that content, which may be lying in your data center, or like I say, centers of data. You could be having a lot of stuff on different clouds as well. So moment they are going out of sight, I need to understand, hey, the identity is the biggest strong parameter that you need to hold on to. So therefore, I need to then be careful about, the devices that they're coming in with, as we know. So you should have a solution wherein which I'm able to identify it registered or not registered, for example, device. And even if it's a registered device, if it's actually compliant or there's got a breach or it's not got the latest antivirus, whatever is the profile that you want your remote users to log in with, that has to be sort of enforceable, right? And number two, if it's a device that you do not own, which is most of the scenarios right now, then you have no right to control the device. But you certainly have a right to control the applications that you have actually, corporate apps that are sitting on that person's device. So you then want to wrap your corporate applications and kind of create a two-faced persona on that device where there's personal information. He can carry on doing what he wants. But if he's going to log an SAP, sort of an Android app or an iOS app to access some SAP information, he can't cut paste it to his Facebook or can't cut paste it to his SD card, right? So we need to basically make sure that on devices that we don't control, we definitely want to control our app access, and obviously the entire provisioning, the patching, the deprovisioning, all of that good stuff is what I really want, because the user has gone away from me, right? So you certainly need to have that control. Now, the third element here is also that once they are out and they're going out there and they're interacting with customers or your partners, chances are that sometimes inadvertently there could be some information that is accidentally forwarded or shared, which is something that you do not want that information to be shared. So as an IT person, not only are they out of sight and they're coming in on devices that I don't know, and I still got to ensure that security is on, I certainly want to make sure that I help them, making sure that they don't actually forward or don't accidentally move information that is very proprietary to the company. So I need to ensure that the data that is what we classify as critical, confidential, or even public, at least I should be able to help the user and stop him if he's trying to move something in that sense. And similarly, now we have, everybody is now using devices, and obviously they're going to Play Stores and, the Google Play Stores and downloading a lot of applications, and they may be very inadvertently downloading an app for their own productivity purpose. It could be a calculator, it could be a even a I'm just saying simple thing like an exchange calculator, right? The xe.com kind of things. Now, one doesn't know whether that particular application that has been downloaded from the Play Store is malicious in any way, right? And therefore, I need help, as in me as the IT guy, to say that in my organization, I have sanctioned maybe about 7 or 8 SaaS applications, CRM, Workday, Office 365. These are the things that I'm saying, okay, and that's a sanctioned app. But is there somebody that can tell me that on my users' devices, right, they're probably running close to 12 to 15, SaaS-based applications, which are not authorized by me. So is there a way in which there is a tool that can help me to know, A, is it a malicious kind of application? In a sense, where is this originating from? Does the company have a registered office somewhere? What are they using to come in, etc. So there has to be a service which says that, hey, don't sweat. On a scale of 1 to 10, let's say Office 365 has got a scorecard of 10, this application is 7 or 8 in terms of a secure piece. Somebody needs to tell me that. And not only that, I should be able to revoke stuff, right? So because I don't want those additional SaaS apps on my endpoints. So I think this is really what is the concern areas moving from within the four walls. And as you expand out, this is the trouble that you have. So today's environment, simply because everybody is moving so much and more so now in this current pandemic that we have, I need to ensure security at every level, right? So I would say the new security paradigm, which is probably accentuated by this situation. Number one, your perimeter firewall is no more the firewall that you thought about, because your users who are out there, if they get compromised, right, that is your perimeter. Because somebody is breaching your perimeter means not typically your perimeter firewall, but somebody's got the identity of your employee or your user and is using his device to jump into your data center or to the cloud piece, right? So therefore identity is really the new firewall. And number two, devices, literally, because you do not know which device they come in, are the new perimeter. Think of it like that. It's again no more the four walls of your data center. And in this new paradigm, because of it being so rampant and everybody so violently connected, you have to assume that you're breached. If I have to assume that I'm being robbed, then what is my posture every day with my organization that I need to do from a security point of view? Because I'm going to assume a breach model, right? So therefore, I'm constantly looking, I'm constantly checking for things, and so that brings me to this little picture, which I thought probably echo everybody's sentiment is when did you last run some sort of a threat check on your environment? And I'm not talking about a VAPT test or a vulnerability assessment penetration test into your network. That's one side of it. But I'm more talking about mobility, identity, data, all of that lying beyond just your data center, right? So when did you last run a threat check? And that actually brings me up to what was the whole idea of getting you all together on this session, is that we are running a security workshop for organizations, right? Because everybody on this call is already running Office 365. Some of you all are already running Microsoft 365, or some of you all have bought licenses for M365, but the baseline here is Office 365. So I'm not going to even talk about that, because that is something you know well. You're trying to move up the ladder, right? So we can run this security workshop for you at no cost. And what do we really do? I'm going to talk about it in the next few slides. Essentially, we are looking at threats around your email environment, threats around your identity, in terms of your users, and general threats that we see in the environment, right? This is an exercise that we will do for you if you allow us to come in, and that's in the feedback form that Kiran will send at the end. You please tick that off, right? So what exactly are the objectives of the security workshop? It's very, very simple. The first piece is that we want to understand the threat environments around email, identity, and data, like I said, right? For those of you who have Office 365 only, what we're going to do is that we're going to enable M365 25 user trial license on your tenant. You identify those top 25 users that you want us to keep a watch on, and ideally it is the senior management folk, because they are the ones who are typically targeted. And we will run this whole thing for a week, and we'll play back some reports, which I will show you some format of. So what is the approach? Now you'll see there in blue a couple of products that I'm talking about, which again I'm going to cover later. But the point is that we are using the Azure Active Directory identity protection and the CASB service, or the Cloud Application Security Broker service. In that, we're going to basically discover all the threats to identity, right? We're also going to use advanced threat protection to discover, funny attachments, funny links that are coming in, and that we see in your environment, and we can tell you whether that's clean or good. And we have been observing that somebody has been attacking some of your users with a lot of malware attachments, and sometimes that could be sort of preceded by a phishing attack. And we'll link all that for you during this approach, and we'll just basically recommend in terms of the threats that we've seen, and obviously some of the tools that you can switch on if you already have M365, or if you don't, you may not even have to buy M365. There are components within M365 that you may want to start off with. So I'm going to come back to that as well. It's not like you have to buy a big bang M365 product to move. No, you can even buy the respective elements, right? What is out of scope, just to be a little clear, because this is a quick assessment, because we understand each environment is slightly different. And the way we approach customers is not with a set of tools, but I want to understand in your use case, what are your use cases? What are you trying to get done in your environment, right? And accordingly, we actually stitch use cases. So our approach in the whole collaboration space is always around use cases, right? And I guess when we do a one-on-one with you later, you'll understand what I mean, and we can share with you some of the use cases that we've done. So the engagement tools, again, I've just put a quick snap here. And if you can, sorry, if you can see my mouse, I hope you can see my mouse. So the M365 is nothing but Office 365 plus the enterprise mobility and security piece tucked into it, right? And in the EMS piece, if you realize the labels that I'm using, we are going to use Azure Active Directory, because this is the I would say the part of EMS which talks about the identity, the risky sign-in users, users whose credentials are out there. All that information and good intel is what we get when we actually use the Azure Active Directory part, right? The same thing in terms of, for example, if there are files sitting in OneDrive, or somebody's introducing files there which they shouldn't be there in OneDrive or anywhere else, because we can not only connect to OneDrive, we can connect to any cloud service which allows us to hook into their API. I can tell you behavior of users on those cloud services and files that shouldn't be there, for example, on those cloud services. But in our example, or in our security workshop, we'll limit it to OneDrive and tell you what's going on OneDrive. Third, of course, is the advanced threat analytics. Again, like I said, how is the behavior of users on cloud or on premise is part of that workshop. And number four, some of you may have already turned it on. If not, the Office 365 ATP also forms part of that M365 SKU that we talk about. And advanced threat protection is all about looking and ensuring that you have safe attachments and safe links in email content that's coming. So obviously, we are then going to look for unsafe attachments and unsafe links that are there in your environment, right? So that's one piece of the puzzle. So Azure Active Directory identity will give us insights into your identity. And we're going to detect all those good stuff that I talked about. And I'm going to show you some of the reports. I'm just talking about some of the tools that we're going to use. Second is this advanced threat protection, or the ATP piece that I just spoke about. It'll again look at threats to email, threats to data, such as phishing and malware, and people are trying to load stuff or send stuff via the email to you or load into your OneDrives. Users may not know this is happening, but we're going to show you that report. And of course, cloud app security, the same thing that we're doing for on-premise, we will also tell you your cloud behavior, right? And essentially, we're going to talk about in scope is the Office 365 piece. But like I said, CASB can be linked into any cloud service that you have. But as part of the workshop that we're doing right now and the scan, we will really tell you everything to do with your O365 tenant, right? So a few key reports that we will show, and this is just a few sample that I'm talking about. The first thing is that when we run it, and we run it for a week, right? We attach that tenant to those 25 users. There is nothing of data that Microsoft sees in terms of user data. It's just telemetry information that we'll be telling you about. So the first thing on identity, if you look at it, if you see that there are four little tiles there. There's high risk users, right? There is medium risk users. There's unprotected sort of risky sign-ins, and some legacy authentication going on, right? So the high risk users are basically counts of users we're going to see. And indication is that this identity may be compromised, right? Because this is a service that's running at the back. For example, if somebody is trying, a login is sent in from Singapore, let's say at 12:15 now, and in 30 minutes later, the same login is sent in from America, for example. That's just a non-viable travel plan, right? So that could be something very, very fishy. Or number two is that there is an anonymous IP trying to log in, or somebody's trying to log in from an anonymous IP. Well, those are little red flags that we say that this is a high risk piece, right? Second is a sign-in risk, right? Probability that a given authentication request isn't authorized by the identity owner, right? So we will classify those for you as well. And the reason why we are able to do that is because we have a service called Azure AD Identity Protection, and these are the risky events. I'm excluding the blur for this, but I thought it's useful to put it. So users with leaked credentials. Now we are as Microsoft understand what are the credentials available on the dark web. So chances are that we realize that your CFOs or your senior management, that particular user's credentials are available on the dark web. And moment I'm logging in today, I want to then challenge him to reset his password, right? I want to challenge him with a second factor of authentication. So the action that you might do for when you sense that this is a leak credential is very, very different. Somebody signing in from an anonymous IP, like we talked about, traveling from atypical places, right? Devices. I sense that the endpoint device, he may be a registered device is infected. What do I want to do? Right. So that conditional access story that we spoke about, we are all sort of rallying around this piece because I'm realizing that 65 to 70% of breaches happen if your identity is not clean. You may be using, I would say non-SAML based, older legacy authentication protocols that do not allow you to do things like multi-factor authentication. So we'll highlight that. People are logging in with very simple username and passwords. Might have to change that for you. And of course, the medium risk. So we'll show you a count of the users. We just sort of give you that graph, right? This is about the second kind of report sample. These are just a few. There are a lot more that we will talk. But this is talking literally. What you see over here is again, there is the red ones indicate there's an email malware, and the greeny ones talk about an email phishing. So in this example, we see that on a particular day, there was a lot of phishing mails sent to this particular user, and thereafter there was a lot of malware attachments that were trying to hit. And over here, it talks about a malware attachment where that you see that big sign over there. The users probably clicked it, right? So you don't want that to happen. So and at any point in time in this report, we can tell you the total number of mails that's come in, what's malware, what's phishing, all of that good stuff will show you. So again, we'll again tie this up to those 25 users to see over the last 30 days, or in fact, we are going to run it for 1 week, at least over the last 1 week, what are you seeing, right? Top email threats, for example. So here you're going to say that we will come out and call you and say that these 5 people have been targeted very much for some sort of a malware campaign. And not only will be able to tell you who are those recipients, but who is the sender of that malware campaign. And we will also tell you down here what are the sort of the remediation mechanisms that you put into place, right? Whether it's an anti-malware engine that jumped in, or we have the ATP, the advanced threat protection safe attachments. They found an attachment in a mail that was malware, so they ran it in a sandbox. They blew it up. They realized that it was not a very benign Word file. It was actually trying to execute some code. So strip that out, send the mail ahead. All that good stuff is what we will show you in an email, right? And sort of tying it all together a little bit. So we find in this example that we sense that there was an impossible travel activity for somebody's trying to log in, right? And they tried that, and obviously there was a failed sign-in story. Then you find that somebody's trying to use a Tor browser. Tor browser typically hides the IP address from where you come in, and they've tried that again after some time. And then after that some time, they've actually decided they managed to get through, right? And they probably hit their SharePoint service and probably just uploaded 2 files, for example, 2 files as part of the anti-malware detection. I find that 2 files were uploaded into OneDrive because CASB has spotted something there and has found that that's not a very good, not a very well-behaving file. So we will talk about and share all of these things with you. This I've shown you a few sample of reports, and at the end of that exercise, which is at the end of the week, primarily, of course, like I said, 3 areas: the identity, the mail, and the data. We will share with you what we think are the recommended product lines that you can pick up. Or if you already have those licenses, like some of you all do have, then we can actually help you to then work out a scope based on your use cases that pop up. And then we give you a scope of work. We come and help you deploy that whole thing in, right? So that's really what the security workshop is going to look like. It starts very simple with a pre-engagement call. So again, please keep in mind when the feedback form comes to you, please basically fill that up and tell us whether you're interested or not. So we'll come and do a call with you, right? Then of course we basically set up the M365 trial license in your tenant. It's for 25 users. You identify who are those top 25 you want to get some telemetry back on. We run it for a week. After that, we, with your help, take the reports. So I can't access those reports. So your admin will have to tell us. And if you wish to anonymize those results, you can anonymize it or redact it, because we can get that information back for you to show you what's happening in your environment across email, identity, and the data compromises. And after that, we present the findings with recommendations and we close out. Again, no cost for this exercise. We are hoping that once you see that, and chances are you'd want to probably fix some of those holes, right? And we decommission and walk away, right? Now the so that's really how simple it is. So the question perhaps on your mind is, do we really need to do this, all right, in terms of run a threat check? And my counter to you is actually up there. I mean, do you have the answers? Do you know who's accessing? Do you know whether that account has been compromised? Do you see it up there? Some of the questions that may be at top of your mind, right? From where is this user signing in, right? What app is he accessing? Is the device healthy? How do how do I control or protect my corporate files on mobile devices I can't see, right? So if you don't have the answers and you wish to have the answers, and I'm hoping that you're looking something like this, do you have a set of tools then to help me out address these questions? And the answer is we do. I hope my little picture comes up there. That is the best one I could get of a hare and a tortoise, right? And the whole idea is that you can go as fast as you want with the adoption, or you can go as slowly and as, I would say, calibrated as you want. And the reason why I'm going to now talk to you about some of the tools that, again, at a very high level, because we don't have the time to run through each of them. But as I talk about some of these tools that you can bring in for your use case, keep this in mind. Number one, the first thing is in terms of as simple as ensuring that the end device, for example, has a perfect secure OS on it, right? And in that sense of the word, some of you all may be using Windows 10 Home Editions, and some of you all are probably using Windows 10 Pro. I would urge you to look at the Windows 10 E3 and E5 because they have been actually constructed very, very differently. The simple thing, a Windows 10 E3 or E5, I hope a lot of people may not know, but it's actually a virtualized operating system underneath that you're running on that laptop. And the reason they've done that using Hyper-V underneath is they're trying to isolate the OS, the kernels, and all the other little things that they want to do in separate VMs. So I'm sure a lot of you all didn't know that, right? But it's a virtualized based security that's running on E3 and E5. So what is the difference between E3 and E5? We can briefly look at it, but all I can tell you is that E3 has brought a lot of the security elements in, everything to do with the pre-breach scenario that could happen on the device. And E5 just adds the post-breach forensic analysis that you can do with Windows 10 E5. So your first point of entry may be as simple as that. Let's ensure that everybody is coming back onto a Windows 10 platform, because we had a customer who had a mix of Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10 Pro, right? They decided to start there. And they decided to just get everybody on a common platform because it was very, very secure, right? The next set of tools, I'm just going to introduce you to three sets so that you don't get too confused, is something called, you'll hear us talk about EMS. It's the Enterprise Mobility Plus Security Suite. And what does it really contain? It actually contains a suite of little products because they've kind of bundled it, and I'll show you on the pricing. But essentially, EMS is tools for identity and access management. So all that strong identity, single sign-on, risky user, self-service password, all that good stuff is there in the Azure Active Directory piece there. Next, of course, is the well-tuned Intune. And I must confess that if you just use Intune by itself, it may not be the best endpoint management tool for you. When it is used in conjunction with all the other services, is when the entire proposition becomes very, very solid, right? So Intune is what is the piece to manage the endpoint devices and applications. Third, of course, is we talked about information, if you remember, right? So Azure Information Protection is the product line suite that we talk about, information protection. What does Azure Information Protection allow me to do? If somebody wants to send some content around, end user wants to send it to his to a partner or to a customer, he can actually associate some rights with that file. That means when I send the file, let's say to you, I can say that you can't print it, you can't forward it, you can't edit it, and I want it to die in your in your end in about 7 days time. When I say die, the file will be listed in your PC, but when you double click, it won't open. For example, things like that. Or I want to take it one step further, where I want to actually classify a lot of the content that we are creating around the organization. Think of it like a little bit of an information lifecycle protection, or DLP kind of solution. Couple that along with this end user rights, and you're now beginning to have some control and how your data should be moving. So that's the Azure information protection piece. And the identity driven closure, or I would say more in terms of the advanced threat protection, is all about watching user behavior on premise. And if there's something amiss, I want to be flagged off. And it's also watching user behavior on your cloud applications, right? If your cloud, if for example, on OneDrive, if he's doing something funny, or every day he comes and then suddenly I find the behavior pattern has changed on his cloud piece, I want somebody to tell me and flag off what's going on. So that's the cloud piece. So each of these elements, obviously, it's like it's more of a the EMS is more of a marketing packaging, because it's like 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is, if you buy them separately, it's going to cost you, let's say, $10. But when you buy it with EMS as a package, it's going to cost you maybe 750 or even 5 rupees. You'll see it's almost 50% discounted when you buy that, right? And the third element of this is that packaging this whole thing, the O365 that you already have, the Windows 10 that I spoke about, and the EMS piece that I spoke about, Microsoft is again trying to make it available in any form factor that you want, right? So there is something called the Microsoft 365 Business. So for organizations on this call today who don't have very vast numbers, there's a beautiful package. I'm going to talk about that to you, which brings all of these three elements together under one hood at a good price point, right? And of course, for the larger enterprises on the call, that means I'm saying people who are more than 300 users, you all must be aware of it. You have the M365, E3, and the E5 plans, right? So there are just, I want to just be very clear. There is just three sort of approaches to try and get a hold of this whole threat that we just spoke about, right? So very briefly, again, one slider for this. Windows 10. Windows 10, in a very broad sense of the word, has pre-breach control. So pre-boot compromise. That means before the operating system even comes up, we've had scenarios where the malware is already fit in. It was jumped into your BIOS, actually speaking, right? So he's even there before the OS starts, because when the OS starts, then your antivirus starts. It's too late. He's already embedded below that, right? So you certainly want to have some controls at that level on the pre-boot compromise piece. Malware and viruses, that nothing much to say about that. Stolen credentials. Remember, I talked about Windows 10 having a virtualized environment underneath. So you have credential guard, which basically actually halves your credentials in a separate virtual machine. And there's a very special relationship between Intel and Microsoft, because they're also trying to embed those credentials into the silicon, that is into the chipsets, into your laptops. Pretty interesting, because software can be still got at, but Intel and Microsoft have come out with something, and I think those laptops have to have a particular chip. But moment they have a chip, the credentials are then pushed into silicon, right? So that's good stuff on credentials, because we know 70% of breaches are happening there. And data theft, right? We just spoke about it. We need to control that. And if this, so all the purples that you see there are some of the pre-breach controls. And if something happens, right, then I need to be able to do some forensics. So once the intruder's in, Windows 10 is also going to be able to do that. So it's a very noisy slide, but essentially there's device protection down here, threat resistance, identity protection, information protection. This is what you get in Windows 10 E3. So if you're moving away from your Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 or even Windows 10 Pro, when you come onto this piece, you're getting this part of the puzzle, as well as post breach, right? There I can analyze what's happening, and that would be the E5 plan of Windows 10. So this is going to be setting up a very strong endpoint device for you, right? That's a quick look in terms of the E3 and the E5 functions. There's one thing that I want to point out very, very interesting here, and you will see this virtualization rights, right? Which kind of got hidden all this time. But for those of you on the call, if you don't know, Microsoft has something called Windows Virtual Desktops, right? And we have actually a customer that's uh, two customers that have come on board, and there are a couple of pilots going on. What does this mean? This means that if I have a Windows 10 E3 or an E5 SKU, right? The whole the how do I say the rights to run Windows virtual desktops in Azure. I don't have, it's free. I can do that, which means the whole orchestration layer, how to spin up these Windows virtual desktops, etc. Your rights to run that already in Azure is on. What you will have to pay for, obviously, is the VMs that you're going to spin up, right? So if you're going to have, let's say, you decide for 50 users or 100 users, we do have, Windows E3, E5 with us. I can actually, and today they can't access it. A lot of things that people are trying to, find a different way of coming in. One of the ways that you can come in is using Windows Virtual Desktops from Azure, spin it up. That entire orchestration piece you're already entitled to use, free of cost, no charge for that, right? What you're only going to charge is your network traffic. Obviously, that's one bill, and the VMs that you spin up. Not only that, in Windows Virtual Desktops, and it's again available only on the cloud, a lot of y'all may or may not have heard about the Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session that's available. What does that mean? So supposing I have 10 people, or let's say 60 people. Or no, okay, let's keep it simple. I need 10 people to have virtual desktop access from Azure, right? And these 10 people, let me say, uh, they're very light users. They don't use too much. So what Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session allows me to do is that one single VM of Windows 10 Enterprise, I can have 3 people actually having multiple sessions going on with one VM, right? So in case all my 9 guys, for example, are all light loaded guys, right? I don't have to spin up 9 virtual desktops in Azure and incur that burn every month. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up 3 Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session VMs. So there's VM 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to make sure that 3 of them are onto one, the next 3 of them are onto the second one, and the next 3 of them are onto the third one. And at the end of the month, I'm not burning 9 VMs bill. I'm actually burning a 3 VM bill. So that's good stuff. And when we meet you, we can discuss whether that is something that you want to look at as a fallback, right? So that's Windows Virtual Desktops, and that is available here simply because you have an E3 or an E5 license. So the difference, if you look at between E3 E5, while I've been talking, is a lot of the response post breach in terms of the Windows Defender ATP is coming to you in the E5 SKU. So that's the first. If you want to start slow, like a hair, when I say hair, you want to be very deliberate about what you invest. Make sure that the end devices are solid. It's a very simple start. Make sure that the end devices are solid, and I just want to do that. We can do that, and I'll talk about pricing later to you, right? If that piece of the puzzle is sorted out for you, and now you're trying to say, and there are many different ways that people are approaching this, especially during this time, but I want to have a control of I want to have make sure that the collaboration is very secure. People are all over the place. We want to get a control of this. Then it's good to look at EMS, and I'm going to talk about all of those 4 elements, but again, each of those 4 elements can be acquired separately. So in a holistic way, this is what the EMS looks like. There's identity and access management, there's mobile device and app management, the information protection, and the threat detection that I spoke about. So if I briefly talk about 1 or 2 interesting features where you might want to start, right? I might want to enable a single sign-on for my organization because I don't want passwords to be floating, right? Very simple. It's part of your Azure AD. It's part of that module. You can set it up, multi-factor, all that good stuff. Second, I probably want to bring in a conditional access because depending on who is coming in, what are they asking for? And depending again in terms of, is this user's credentials already compromised? Is there malware detected, et cetera, et cetera? I can classify whether the user itself is at risk or the session is itself is at risk. And according to that condition, then I can decide to allow it, or I might want to have a challenge of a multi-factor authentication. Or if I found out that this morning my CFO's credentials are available in the dark web, I'm going to force him to reset his passwords, right? Because there's a problem there. Or I deny the access completely or give him very, very controlled access, to only not the critical application. So conditional access forms just one of the 15 or 16 features that Azure Active Directory has, right? I'm just calling out a few things in the interest of time. Mobile device and app management, I think you all know this. This is the Intune story. So right in terms of enrolling a device, making sure that Wi-Fi settings, printer settings are all pushed down automatically. I get a report in terms of which device is compliant, not compliant, and the decommissioning of the device. I need something to handle the life cycle for the device management. Same thing goes for mobile applications for iOS and Android. I need to be able to manage the entire life cycle of that product, right? So that's the mobile device and app management piece. The third one is the Azure Information Protection. Remember, these are all little individual solutions, but they're being bunched up under EMS, right? So the information rights management is what we are talking about. So it's, in a sense, what we are saying is we're giving some amount of access control and policy enforcement for an end user. That is when he's sending information out, he can track the document. And if there is some trouble with that or he accidentally sent it, he can revoke stuff. Like I said, forward, copy, print, all that can be done by him. And at a larger organization, if I then want to start classifying content, labeling content and applying these policies to it, that is where Azure Information Protection comes into play. There are 2 plans. There's a plan 1 and a plan 2. The plan 1 is about the end user that I spoke about, but the plan 2 is a larger plan, which allows you to do this kind of stuff with your documentation. So once you label content as they are typing based on keywords, these get automatically labeled. And based on the label, you will have a background policy that you're trying to enforce on it, right? And the last part of it of EMS, remember, we are trying to make sure that we are secure. The whole idea is that, can I make sure that I'm secure? And obviously, this is going to come out from a security threat check that we do. So once we do find out there are problems, we probably come back with one of these elements, or maybe you need all of them to work together. That's the point of the security workshop, right? So threat detection, over there are 2 parts to it. One is what we term as the Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics piece, where he is going to baseline your users for 21 days, right? Watching what they do, what devices they come into, and where all do they go. Moment after the 21 days, if there's a change of behavior of that particular user or device or access, your IT gets informed immediately, right? That's the on-premise story. And the CASB story, or the Cloud Access Security Broker story, is doing the same thing for your users' behavior on the clouds. And wherever they are storing any data there, and we find there's malware sitting there, CASB actually, sort of closes out the other end. Provided we are able to sort of connect into Salesforce and they allow us to connect all that stuff, and all CASB guys do that right now. But CASB then looks at the cloud end and realize and make sure that we are fairly safe there. So this is really what the EMS piece of the puzzle is, and you see some of the the line item products at the bottom. If you remember the circles that we spoke about, right in the beginning, well, that kind of roughly maps to which are the areas that you want to look at, right? And so that's the second piece of the puzzle that we're going to talk to you about, the EMS piece, right? And of course, the third piece is again just a packaging of all of this stuff, right? So if I look at today, there are a lot of customers who are under 300 users on this bridge today. So Microsoft 365 Business, what does it do? It wraps the O365, which you already have, and you can upgrade to this plan, by the way. Brings in Teams, which I'm sure you're already using, EMS that I just spoke about, and with Microsoft 360 Business, you get the Windows 10 Pro upgrade, rights. Which means if you have Windows 7 or Windows 8, you can move it up to Windows 10 Pro. For the Microsoft 365 enterprise plans, they come in with Windows 10 anyway. Whether if they've taken an E3 plan, then they get Windows 10 E3, and if they take an E5 plan, they get an E5. So for people beyond 300 users, that's the story, right? And when I say adopt at your own pace, this is what I mean. So Windows 10, what are you talking about? How much is a plan 3, on a per monthly basis per user? It's $12, and if it's E5, it's 18, right? Similarly, EMS, most important thing to look at. Each of these elements can be bought separately. So if you say that, hey, Intune and all that we are sorted, I just want this whole story that you just talk about identity, then you have two plans there. There's a plan 1 and a plan 2, right? So you can start as low as $9 per user per month, right? Or you want the Intune piece, it's $6, right? And so on and so forth. So if you look at the add-ons and you take all the advanced puzzles, right, you'll realize that it costs actually individually $38, right, per user per month. And what Microsoft has done, obviously, they want to push you onto the, I would say, plan 5. I'm talking about the most advanced plan. You get that for as low as $15 per user per month, right? And the plan E3 is basically all the plan ones that you've seen earlier. So starting as low as $875 to about $15 per user per month. Again, this will be the outcome of what we see as the workshop and your use cases. Point I want to just make sure is that individually it can be bought. Again, start at your own pace or buy them together, and that's what you see. And for the people on the call today, 300 users and less, these are the plans available to you. Very, very nice. And I think only Microsoft can do this, make it in, sometimes it's a little confusing, but sometimes it's actually very beneficial for customers. For example, let's take the first plan. Again, these are all 300 user limit plans, keep in mind, right? So if you just want the basic plan, and when I say basic, I'm going to give you MS Office, that's Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It's going to be an online version of it. But along with that, you will also get Mailbox, which is a 50 GB mailbox, OneDrive or 1 TB. You get SharePoint and obviously Teams. Everybody's violently using Teams. This whole package is 125 rupees per user per month. You can get going with Microsoft 365 Business Basic, right? Obviously, the 660 plan per user per month includes a rich desktop experience, which means you can download MS Office, let's put it that way, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, on up to 5 devices, whether they are iOS or whether they are Windows. Up to 5 devices is what you can actually load this, and those services continue here. The sweet spot really at the end of the day is the Business Premium Edition, because as you can see, at 1320 a user per month, 1,320 rupees per user per month, you get the rich Office, you get the Exchange, the OneDrive, the SharePoint, the in Teams, and now you get the Intune, which is that whole mobility piece. You get the Azure information protection that we spoke about, right? You get all of that stuff. And because you're a business premium plan, not only are you, remember I said Windows 10 E3 and E5 are eligible for Windows Virtual Desktop rights? Well, the Microsoft 365 Business Premium, if you buy the 300 users for your users, you can spin up, you're entitled to spin up those Windows Virtual Desktops I spoke about at no cost, right? That comes only with the business premium plan. For those who just want the apps, the Microsoft apps per se, even you can start there. I don't want to buy 18,000, 25,000 for each user, right? I want to start small because cash is king right now. I want to just go very slow. So at 545 rupees a month, you will get that rich office and all those things that I spoke about, in addition to OneDrive, so that your users can actually store content in OneDrive. So again, choose your entry point with Microsoft. That was the whole point that I wanted to speak about. You can just start with the endpoint device, or take the entire EMS suite, or even take some of those independent security modules, or actually take the whole mix. So I kind of coming to the end of this. So I just want to say that for us, we don't want to come and sell you the tools, honestly speaking, because we feel it becomes very useful when we actually are able to, to analyze your environment. That's therefore it's, each customer is very different, and we then build around your use cases, right? And then accordingly, whether the EMS fits in or just the Azure AD part fits in, we can figure that out, right? And not everybody has to get everything. So there are different ways that we can actually make sure it becomes commercially viable for you, right? And I've come to the last two slides of my thing. A little bit about our organization. A lot of people who may not know us. We are an edge, core, and a cloud organization, right? I'm one of the technical directors here at New Wave. I look after the cloud division, and we've been established for the last 21 years, and we operate in the south of India, as you see. And our portfolio really stems across these four areas because we believe customers like you are undergoing transformations in one or more of these areas. Today's discussion was all about the whole modern workplace solutions on the first bracket, but we also extend ourselves into the data center core piece, which is all about HCI, setting up private clouds, transforming backups for organizations, because people have not been able to get to tapes, have not been able to get to their offices because, and their backup is at a huge risk. So people are now beginning to rapidly do some of those transformations. Again, some of these initiatives are on the back burner. They've come to the front because of this situation. Security transformation is a never ending game, to be honest, because as better we get, I think our best bet over there is to set up multi layers of defense, to be honest, right? So, and sometimes what people are realizing is they want convergence. Point products may be nice, but I think people are beginning to realize that managing multiple point products is becoming a management overhead. And I think if you look at what's happening on the compute side, you have hyperconverged infrastructures coming in. If you look at the backup side, and we have lovely solutions from Dell EMC there, again, they've converged the entire backup into 2U form factor, everything in there. Your backup software, your analytics, your disk, and it's again the number one in the world. Everything is converging, right? So even on security now, people are trying to look at convergence. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, 9 months ago is when we signed up with Automation Anywhere to sort of automate. People were looking at automating processes. I'll be honest and say that in the last 3 months, when this whole lockdown happened, this went on a back burner with a lot of customers. But I can tell you now, coming forward out, a lot of them are now relooking at these projects simply because of they're having to do more with the same crowd, or sometimes some of them have had to let go people, but yet provide the same thing. So they're looking at automation. So we have a dedicated team that runs that. And all this is only possible with the strength of our partnerships below there, right? So that's what you see. So with that, I'm going to pause. I've come to the end. And just before I hand it off to Praveen, if there are any, sorry, Kiran, if there are any questions, please feel to unmute yourself because this is a very informal. That's why we kept it as a Teams meeting and not a live event. Please unmute yourself, ask a question. If I can answer it, I will do that. Otherwise, I will certainly get back to you. So I'm going to keep quiet now. And yeah, so any Q&As, questions, Kiran, have you seen on the chat pad?
Let's say I would request all the customers to use either they can unmute yourself and ask your questions, or still you can use the Q&A in the chat panel to ask questions too. I would be happy to take those questions to discuss on this platform.
While you're thinking of those questions, I can share with you some of the work from homes that we've looked at. Some customers have, wanted their people's home machines to come up, but realized that they had Windows 10 Home editions, right? Some of them may have had a Pro edition, but most of them are Windows 10 Home. So a particular organization has actually taken the Windows Pro to Windows, Windows Home to Windows Pro upgrade, because moment that becomes a Windows 10 professional, then you can actually start managing that device, right? And as low as, if I'm not mistaken, it was 400 rupees per user per month, and they've actually running, they're trying to make sure that those endpoint devices at home are moved up to Windows Pro, and they're reimbursing their users, right? Number one. Second is, of course, this Windows Virtual Desktop has taken off very, very well, right? And the reason being that customers can't trust the end device because it's a home device. I do not know. I do not want you coming in. Of course, there are people who are also doing IPsec VPNs from their end devices, but certain organizations are saying, can we set up a VDI quick? Because there is no delivery of server and storage devices. I can't set it up now on premise, but can I do something via media at the moment, right? That's where Windows Virtual Desktop has come to the rescue, because on Windows Virtual Desktops, we can actually basically run Windows 10 and Windows 7, interestingly, right, in those virtual desktops from the cloud. Obviously, if you have the SKUs like I spoke about, there is no charge for the orchestration of that. You just spin up the VMs, and again, over there you have, I would say, the normal kind, all the VMs available in Azure are available for you to spin up, right? Including NVIDIA and, GPU centric ones. For some of our customers, there are one customer spun up 25 users, and out of which those 25 users, 20 were part of the engineering design team. So they are actually currently running a pilot. And of course, they are also testing out with broadbands, not with ACT and all, but just a regular dongle broadband. The tests are currently going on. So you can look at actually spinning up Windows virtual desktops at Azure, right? And if some of you already have an account, that's great news. Yeah. So the start point and the end of the day, to be honest, is I think a security workshop. Again, when was the last time you did a threat check? Might as well have somebody else come and look at it. We are using the Microsoft M3. We are not using any third-party tools. It's the M365 E5 SKU that we switch on for those targeted 25 users of yours. And your teams will have the admin portal. We don't do that. We don't have any access to that. And at the end of the week, your team can help us on a remote share screen to pull out those reports and to see whether, where your health check is. And once we see those reports, we share that with you, and then we help you decide how you want to do it. How do you want to plug it, with a whole Big Bang EMS package, or just that I just want Azure AD, right? I want to set up single sign-on, multi-factor, self-service password reset. I want to get that going. Or it could be just like I said, end devices. So I think it's important to start the workshop, and we're more than happy to set that up for you. Any questions, Kiran? Come on.
From there is one question, sir. From where will we will get the recordings? Okay, I think recordings. Anyway, I'm going to send out a thank you note. So in that, I'm going to share also the link of the recording version. You will get it,
Sure.
ma'am.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we can wrap up because I can hear some stomachs grumbling. I don't want to come between them and lunch. So over to you, Kiran, and thank you, gentlemen, once again, all of you all for on this call. And thank you for spending the time because, you could have been anywhere between 12 to 1. And the fact that you're getting flooded with webinars and, there's webinar overload. But the fact that you choose to spend this time with us, honestly speaking, we are very, very humbled. And I really want to, again, thank you for coming here. And I hope the session was useful. I hope it's given some ideas. And believe me, the team is waiting by and they will contact you. And, please let us know where you stand. We don't want to be a trouble. So if you say that, look, I don't want it, thank you so much. Perfectly fine. And if you say, look, I want to take this discussion further, I just want to explore one part of it, perfectly fine. The whole story and you just want Windows 10, believe me, that's a super start, right? So I just want to leave that there. So thank you once again. And yeah, over to you, Kiran, to close us out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditya. That was a very wonderful session that you actually gave today for our customers. And I would also like to thank all the customers who have joined us today and made this webinar successful. And thank you so much, Prince sir, for thanking us for this informative session. So as the next steps, I'm going to send you a thank you note with a link for accessing a recording version as well as a feedback form. Kindly take like some time out from your busy schedule and give your feedback so that we can respond to you suitably post this webinar. Thank you once again. Have a nice day ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much.